and the record. Yeah. So let's unpack that, Anita. I love that you're saying that it's a movement. So talk about that a little bit more.
So I think what has been on my heart in the last little bit is to be able to create a community for women, successful women, right? Because oftentimes what I notice, and this is what happened in my life, like I had risen to a certain level of success, and then being able to be successful and then be submitted to my husband and figure out who's going to be the leader when I'm naturally a leader and he's also a leader and all those kinds of things. Like that's one area that is definitely near and dear to my heart, because I think sometimes we get that messed up. And I know from
Right.
our experience, for my husband and I, there are seasons when we had done that horribly, and there are seasons when we've done it well, and we've learned over time how to be great partners for one another. So being able to help other women in that. But there's also an element of wanting to, in the success of growing the business, like I know for me, like I always wanted to intentionally raise my own kids. I've had nannies, I've had incredible women come alongside me to help me with my kids, especially when they were real little and babies, and I needed that kind of help. And I totally honor that and support that. But I also know that sometimes I've talked to so many women over the years, Jackie, who said, "Oh my gosh, you guys homeschool? I wish I could homeschool." Like hundreds of, probably thousands of women that I have met over the years that have told me they just have a heart to do different things with their kids. Doesn't have to work its way out in the homeschooling space. That's not the only way. But I think that if you have a core value of wanting to be a great mom, then your heart aches if you have to go and give your life to somebody else for 40 or 50 or 80 hours a week. I think I think there's that nonsense of work-life balance is just total crap, and that there's no way, if I'm giving myself to somebody else that much time in a 40 plus hour work or a 50 plus hour work week, that I can all of a sudden also have the priority of those relationships. Because when I come home, I'm going to be exhausted, I'm going to be irritable, I'm going to be snappy, I'm not going to spend the time with my kids and my husband that I really, really want to. So those are some of the other things. But the other thing is, it's interesting when we move over from being an employee to the entrepreneur space, don't we know, like, it's a mindset shift. Like I could be successful over here in the corporate space because I have a team around me. I feel like I have security. I feel like I have, my 401k plans all settled and insurance and all the real, genuinely real things of life, like the really real of life, that make you feel like you're a little bit insulated. Then you move over to the entrepreneur space, and don't we know, especially if you're starting out like as a solopreneur, you can kind of look around going, "Oh shoot, I don't have a team around me anymore. I have to do everything. I'm overwhelmed." And so many entrepreneurs, when we move to that space, we can end up working twice as many hours and make half as much. And that is, to me, that's the worst idea ever. The other element, and you touched on this earlier, I actually think, and I'm going to challenge probably somebody by saying this, I think that ministry does not need to mean that we don't make any money. I don't think that actually Jesus modeled for us at all. I believe that the word models that he was so well cared for and had done so well in his own business as a carpenter. He was able for 3.5 years to provide for the needs for at least 12 people in addition to himself. Right. And
Wow.
so,
Yeah. I didn't think of it
right.
that way. I love that. Yeah.
So when you have this idea that somehow I'm going to take my what I call specialized knowledge, so that's a skill set that we have risen in and perfected and refined over time, and we want to reapply that in a new way in an entrepreneurial setting and wrap a business around that. Like, yes, it's a ministry, but ministry never. I just think that the American church, frankly, I think we've kind of gotten it wrong. I think people have told us that somehow when Jesus says it's better to be poor, that he meant actually financially. So many times he's always ministering to the poor in spirit. So like if you read Matthew, right? Yeah, I'm going through the Gospels all over again. Jesus, when he speaks out and starts with the Beatitudes, he's talking about blessed are those that are poor in spirit, because
Yeah.
that's where they're going to find the kingdom of heaven. So it's a posture. When my
Yeah.
posture and my heart is, Lord, I'm surrendered to you. I need you every day, more and more and more. I need you more in my business than I did when I didn't have a bit. Like I recognize, like, Lord, I need you to be my partner every single day. So I want to create an environment, and that's really the movement that we're on. We are creating an environment and a community of women where we can use wisdom, we can champion one another, we can love each other and support each other right where we at. There's none of that, like, it's just not allowed to have people who are not willing to take action, who are going to be complainers, who are just going to sit around and boohoo. Like I don't have any I don't have any room in my life for any of that anymore. I just don't,
Yeah.
because I believe that God, when he's called us to something and it looks impossible, to me, like, that's where the adventure starts. And part of that is, part of the way that we navigate that is getting around the right community of people that can help champion us. Doesn't mean they're going to do everything for us, but
Right.
it does mean that when it gets hard, I pick you up, you pick me up, and we're able to walk forward together and pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep moving on the path that God has called us to, and keep going.
Yeah, that's a word of encouragement. Keep going. Like, dust yourself off. It may not look perfect right now, but you are a child of God who is something, God has planted something in you and he will see you through it. If he's giving you this vision, he's giving you all these things, God's not going to just leave you hanging and say, well, that was good. That was it. You figure it out. He's so much better than that. I love that you want to champion other people through that. That just makes my heart so happy, because I think we need more people like you, Anita, out there who are willing to say, hey, let's roll up our sleeves together and let's see how I can help you. I think it's a good word. And I love that. I love that you said God speaks to the poor in spirit. I think we all need that. I mean, I don't think it's any, you know, I don't think it's not, I think it's very meaningful. I guess I want to get my words right here. Very meaningful that God came to the woman in the well. The well, meaning for me, I think when I think about the well, when God draws out that water, he said, I am living water. I think there's something when we draw from God. He knows everything. He knows everything. He's not fake. There's no facade. In business and life, there are people who will say they're on your side and they may not be, they're just out for themselves or whatever it might be. And I think that Jesus sees us right where we're at, and he's not out for anyone but your heart. And I think when we come to the well, we all are every single day. We're not, it's always a posture setting. How do we turn our eyes towards him? How can we come to the cross a little bit quicker than the day before? How can we better set ourselves up in the word so that we can draw from the well a little bit better? And I think the Lord just kind of, I don't know, encourages us in his word that way. And I think he encourages us in life that way. Whether you're a mom who's, tired and exhausted from being up all night, or maybe you're trying to juggle all the million different things and the schedules, and maybe you're trying to run your own business, and who knows what you have on your plate. I bet the plate is full, because if you're coming to this podcast, you want to be encouraged, because I'm telling you what, your plate's probably full and you need some encouragement today. But I can tell you something, God's with you and he sees you right where you're at. And I don't know, Anita, do you have any other champion words for encouragement today for our listeners?
I think when we recognize that sometimes the community that we're in is not really the best for us, and it's okay to let that go and then be willing to walk in something new. I think it's also okay that when you've been in a community for a really long time and it's the right community for you, it's totally okay to stay. Right? So
Yeah.
but like in the entrepreneurial space, I was in lots of different mastermind communities before I'm in the one that I'm in now, where really everything that we do is we're all focused on being kingdom entrepreneurs. And the definition of that means we are glorifying God in our businesses as entrepreneurs. And there's nothing wrong with the other communities that weren't really a good fit for me, but that was just it. They weren't a good fit for me. Right? So finding a place where you are, at least what I have learned in my life and in lots of mistakes along the way, it's finding a place where people see me they know God's word, and they're willing to speak the hard things to me when I am being a knucklehead, right? Or when I am making mistakes and I am off on my thinking, believing an old lie, living in an old wound, something like that. And they can share that with me in love, right? And they're willing to help me. I have been super fortunate because as I look back over my walk with Jesus, Jackie, I had some incredible older women that would come alongside, and this is the picture that God always gives me. They would reach one hand back and grab my hand and just help me take one step forward. And that's really what I want to do in our community. And we do that a couple of different ways. I have a free ebook that I published this year that's called the 6-Step Blueprint to Build a Profitable Business. That can be a gift for anybody who is interested in kind of going on this journey. And then what we've been talking about is our mastermind community of being able to be involved with a group of women who use wisdom and courage and strength and honor for one another and what God's put inside of us as individuals, and then be able to see, like, to honor you, Jackie, and where you're at and the season that you're in and champion you along the way. Like, that is my greatest honor to be able to do that for you today and every day that we talk. But then also have other ladies that would be willing to do that for me. Like, I just think that's where is at. It's that authentic relationship where it's not about religion. It's really about relationship and God. And then also just, I guess my other encouragement for women, because we have such a tendency to compare ourselves to whatever season you're in, that's where you're supposed to be. So just be in that season. If that's where God's called you, like we were called to homeschool. We always said, this is where we're called. We want to be obedient to that. And that looked different. That meant our lives look very different than a lot of people around us. But the obedience of sitting with God and doing what he calls you to do in that season. So ladies, be so encouraged, because this is kind of how it was always explained to me early on in my walk, is that in my life, like the most important relationships are kind of like a triangle where God is at the top. My husband and I are at the other sides of the triangle. And as my husband and I get closer and closer and closer and closer to Jesus as first and foremost, then we draw closer to one another. And then everybody else actually comes after that. So that includes our kids. I know for moms, sometimes it's hard to put our kids below our relationship with our husband. That just, especially if you have old wounds or believing old lies, or there's hurt there, that sometimes that can be really hard to recognize that that's kind of the priority. And then everybody else after your own family, then everybody else is like outside the circle and they all fall in line after that. And that just helped me to recognize the priorities, because the time that I have spent in intimacy with God has really, it's paid off in droves, because I know God and he knows me. And it has allowed me to be able to walk in the good things that he has for me, even though they're radically hard sometimes. And it has allowed me, when he's come first, to love my children better than I ever could have on my own, and love my husband better, and be a better leader in the entrepreneurial space and a better champion for other successful women in the corporate space, because I know what he's called me to. And I can have confidence that even though sometimes, to be honest, sometimes the timing doesn't work out the way that I think it's supposed to. But I know that God's on my side and he's in the midst of this. And so I can feel confident and trust him as it unfolds in the most beautiful and messy way possible. I have a podcast called The Messy Middle.
Yes.
We can put a link in the show notes on as well. That is just this, right? It's the messy middle. It's called The Messy Middle. And
very
it's
good.
one
You guys gotta
mom's
listen.
journey. Yeah, one mom's journey to build a profitable business, because don't we know, like, life is not always beautiful. It's hard. It can be really, really hard. And sometimes it can be kind of yucky.
But I love that encouragement. you can find beautiful in the hard. And I think in the
Yeah.
messy middle, there's beautiful things are happening. And I think it takes a lot of radical faith, which leads to a lot radical love, which leads to maybe sometimes a radical hard, but leads to something radically beautiful. And I think if we're really getting into that, I want to marinate in those words right now. I want to marinate in God's favor. I want to marinate in how he shows up by our sides in what we think might be like, I don't know what direction, or I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't know how you're going to take me this step, but he shows up. And I love that you remind us of that he's with us always. He doesn't let us go from the beginning to the end, and he knows it all, and he knows you so much, and he just loves you so much, Anita. And I just thank you so much for such a time as this. I just believe God has placed you in this position. And if you are listening today for such a time as this, God has placed you where you are at. And yes, fall into his arms. Go to his calling, whatever he's calling for you to do. I think that it's not an accident you're hearing this message today. And go back, take notes, listen in again, and be encouraged, because I just know that that's going to be your light for the day. Thank you so much, Anita, for coming in and sharing up your light and being a light into our world today.
Yeah, you bet, Jackie. I so appreciate you. I just want to honor you and your listeners and what you're doing. It's so incredibly important. Yeah, we're all blessed because of you. Appreciate you.
That means so much. I could cry. Thank you so much. And have a great week, everybody.